In today's episode, we're diving into what it means to really choose the right portfolio for your goals and dreams. Let's get started.
Hey, it's another edition of Power Your Retirement, and we're continuing our great series on the 7 principles of Powerhouse Financial Advisors. And we're in our 4th installment of this series in today's episode. We're talking about choosing the right investments for your goals. So, you may have certain goals for your financial life, but is your portfolio, are your investments actually aligned with those goals? Did you even know that you could have an ill fit and that you need a good fit for those two things to be matched up so that you can experience success in your financial life? We're going to break that idea down, find out why this is the case with Steve Smith on today's episode. Steve, it's good to be with you again. How's life treating you?
Life is really good, really good. Chasing all those kids around and working in between, but I feel really blessed today.
I'm glad to hear that, and looking forward to our conversation today. Just as a quick scene setter, the last couple of episodes, as we've been talking about some of these foundational ideas and these principles of Powerhouse Financial Advisors, these are the guiding lights for Steve and his team to help you experience financial success. And so we've previously talked about the value of professional guidance. We've talked about managing risk in your retirement journey, and of course, building that strong foundation for retirement. And now we're getting into some of the slightly more specific topics here, Steve, by talking in particular about the investments aligning with somebody's goals. And I know that in your book and through some of the conversations we've already had here on the show before, you often define this as moving away from just whatever checking the box of the default option looks like. And for many people, that starts with target date funds. Can you first of all explain why that's the default? What is a target date fund for those who may not even know that's what they're invested in? Give us kind of a scene setter there for why that usually is the starting point for many people.
The reason why it's a starting point is because it actually has a methodology to it. Maybe not a comprehensive methodology, but nonetheless a methodology. And what people do is they look at that list of options and they're not sure. I just had a client on a Zoom call and they're asking, what do I choose? Should I just go with the target date fund when I'm 65? And that really isn't very strategic because all a target date fund does is it has a methodology of taking almost a full equity exposure when you start your career and then swing all the way to the other side to a bond structure over here. It doesn't take into account what you actually need to get a return, how much you should put in, what other assets you have, what is your spouse doing if they're working, is there an inheritance, do you have a small business, do you rent? The list goes on and on. So it's just a very simplistic methodology, which is better than no methodology.
Yeah, we'll take that. What are exactly the downsides of going with that simpler methodology? What's getting missed, or where are we taking wrong turns if we just check that box with something like target date funds?
Well, the lowest hanging fruit is maybe not the youngest of the crowd. A lot of the companies are going away from a cash balance pension option, but the biggest offense of target date funds is they don't actually even account for the full retirement benefits of the employer. That's the biggest offense that's out there, because when people actually do the target date fund, there's a mismatch between the 401k and the pension. They're not working together. People aren't looking at that. So that's probably the biggest offense that I get with people coming into the office. And I would say almost all had never really contemplated of putting those two together, the 401k and cash balance pension, into one employer plan.
And by that, you mean like a target date fund is automatically rebalancing itself. It's automatically making changes in what it assumes or has derived out of the best choices for somebody who wants to retire on that date. But it's really making those choices in a vacuum, as if the only savings were in that target date fund. But because there are often savings or a pension, Social Security, other factors that are going to be in someone's retirement plan, the choices inside that target date fund aren't necessarily going to automatically match that person's goals.
Yeah, the second offense that I get when I'm meeting with people, Like I was meeting with John, and John is I would call him more of an aggressive investor,
Okay.
and he has that traditional cash balance pension sleeve, which is a larger sleeve in the 20-30% range currently. It gets bigger as goes through, but he's more of an aggressive. When he takes the risk questionnaire, he's closer to the top, much closer to the top than he is to the middle. And with a target date fund, all he gets is vanilla, and he was frustrated by the returns he was getting. And I explained to him that it's because of this large bond piece. He goes, but I'm 45. I'm like, well, that's the methodology, and that doesn't mean that the methodology matches up to who you are, John. And we had to take a hard look at that and what he could do to match up and get an adequate return for the level of risk that he wanted to take. So matching that up, that methodology pretty much leaves out a good majority of the people that are in the target date fund, because they don't ask any questions about who they are as people. It's just, when were you born is really the only thing that they ask for that methodology.
What are the next steps for someone like a John then? We want to get more alignment with our investments and our goals financially. So, if someone starts thinking about a way to align those things a little bit more closely, what are the alternatives? What are the new directions that we can look in beyond this world of just target date funds?
Yeah, I recommend you do the full retirement plan, because I tell people it's almost impossible for me to recommend something off of your list of, 8 to 20 options is typically what we see with the companies we work with. And even the target date funds aren't taking into account, do you have a stay-at-home spouse? Do you have 6 kids? Do you have no kids? Do you have no debt? Do you have tons of debt? All of these things go into a retirement plan that actually ends up funding the discussion, if you will. That's the fuel for the discussion at the very end, and say, okay, this is your situation, and this is the level of risk that is going to take you to your goal of, maybe it was 62 or 65. And we could make adjustments here. We can contribute more, we can increase the risk level and get a higher average return over time. Of course, that's not every single year. Doesn't work like a savings account, but over 10, 15 years, depending on the timeline, we can get better returns by taking a more appropriate level of risk to the person and the goals. So that was a lot of Wall Street gibberish there to say that the question is very complicated. It is not simple like, okay, give me your date of births and I'll throw you into a portfolio. If I said that to a client that came into my office, or I was in the conference room with them at their work, they would usher me right out the door. But yet people and employees pick target date funds every day.
Hmm. That's a great point. This kind of reminds me of when you're filling out your, what is it, your W-2, or your W-9, or whatever that form is, when you go to submit kind of like how much to withhold from your
W9.
taxes. What with that
Yes.
W-9, right? Uh, and you're like, okay, zero exemptions, one, two. What do I write in that line, and what are the differences that it makes? That's got more customization for somebody's situation than a target date fund, which is really saying something, I guess, in terms of it not being
Right.
a very tailored or customized way of doing things.
Yeah,
Um,
at least it asks for exemptions, which are usually children. At least
yeah,
it shows you the grid of what you think you're going to make for the year without a
yeah,
surprise bonus or something.
sure.
It's much more thoughtful. The IRS is much more thoughtful in helping you not pay too much or not enough than target date funds. It's really, the methodology is it's kind of silly. I think it hits the target probably about 10% of the employees.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, especially when you consider you might have somebody who's just starting their career with $1,000 in there, versus somebody who's been there for a long time and has $1 million, in their plan, and distributed amongst those target date funds. And the fact that those would get treated the exact same, depending on, maybe just with the age difference, is a little bit alarming. So you see, obviously, the opportunity to customize, to align these goals a little bit differently, to move the needle for someone. how big of, I mean, if is this making just a comfort difference? You talked about John's situation where, he felt like he was more of a risk person, could take more risk. So what does that actually look like? I know you can't give us specifics on his situation, but what does that look like from a numbers standpoint? We're not just making people feel better about their plan, but they're actually making a tangible difference when we're able to make these changes and move these figures around.
So the scale is as wide as the however many clients I have, because it just depends on how much fixed income. So if John, he doesn't, if John had a spouse that maybe worked for the government and got a pension, right? Something fixed, he could take more risk because you've got more fixed. He's got his Social Security. There's a pension there that's a higher amount, so they could take more risk that way. Maybe just naturally he's more, aggressive. That's another way. And then when you look at it, what is the timeline that they have left to retirement and even into retirement? What they're invested in. It could be something as small as some low six figures to something as big as getting into those seven figure differences if there's enough timeline.
Yeah, it's a great point. So that that should really drive it home for folks that we're talking about very tangible differences here at when we get your investments in line with your goals. The problem is, Steve, that a lot of people get overwhelmed by these conversations. So somebody might think, man, it's really
Mm.
convenient. If I want to retire in 2050, I just pick that target date fund and boom, I'm all set. Boy, that feels good having that be so simple, so easy. Trying to learn about mutual funds and stocks and bonds and all these other things, that's overwhelming. I don't have the time or the energy to dive in that deeply in this area. So, what would be some initial steps somebody could take to evaluate their current investments and move that needle, go beyond just the target date funds as that default?
Well, I recommend you go through a retirement planning. We've got a whole system that we help folks get all their information in, including all of their employer information, all the spouse information, whatever's driving their financial life, debts, all of those things, till we get a comprehensive picture. And then we can really do what's fun, because that's the part that always I encourage everyone that sits down with me to persevere through. I mean, it's a couple meetings, couple three
Yeah.
sometimes, and they've got to go look up some information. Zoom is wonderful because that goes from home, and that's usually where a lot of that information is. So we have that input usually over Zoom, even if we're there a lot of times, because it's easier to get the info. The beautiful thing about that, and this is why I belabor to say that, is that then we go into what I call the what if zone. And that is what clients probably love the most, other than making money. Every client loves that, and being able to retire the way that they want to retire. They love that as well. But the other thing is the comfort that comes with the what if. It's like, what if I retire 58 instead of 65? Okay, maybe they don't like that answer because what they'd have to live on if they did that, but they can clear the cash in the what if. What if I work till 70? What does that look like? And then they can visually, I've got graphs and different things, but we can also just show numbers, whatever they prefer. Everybody's different. And being able to process what's going on in their head and give them a projection of what it looks like, you can just feel a calm come over everyone, is
Hmm.
maybe a nice way to say that. But the what if is where the power of the process comes in, because then people can understand and make really good financial decisions.
Excellent. It all comes from aligning your investments with your financial goals. It's something that very few people actually do, but those who do, it makes an enormous difference in the success of their financial plan. It's something that you should be doing. So if you are an employee of a publicly traded utility and you have investments, maybe a lot of your savings for retirement stuck in those target date funds, realize that you have other options. You are in a unique position to have additional options at your fingertips. Many employers and many setups don't have that, and that's one thing that Steve talks about constantly here on the show, is the fact that through their arrangements, through their designs, and through their plans, you're able to get access to so many additional investment choices and options that really just give you so much flexibility in your financial plan. And that is incredibly valuable. Hard to understate that. So if you'd like to, we often advise people to set up a review, go through that planning process with Steve. He'll help start right there, aligning your goals with your investments. That's the beginning of the conversation, actually. It's talking about you, your plans, your goals for the future, where you stand right now, and then starting to go through that planning process to figure out how you're going to get from A to B to C and beyond. If you'd like to set up that time to meet, you can book a time with Steve online by going to powerupyour401k.com. It's that easy, and we've got it linked in the description of today's show, powerupyour401k.com. And we've got all the ways to get in touch and contact Steve and set up that time to meet for a review of your financial plan there. Steve, great breakdown on today's episode of the importance of aligning those goals with our investments, and we'll look forward to catching up with you on the next episode.
Thanks, Walt.
Next in the series, we'll be talking about hands-off growth with managed portfolios. What does that mean? What does it look like? That'll be the next step in our series as we talk about the different principles of Powerhouse Financial Advisors. Come back and join us for that. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time on Power Your Retirement. This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.